All right, we're live. Elton, I'll catch you at Q&A at the end.
All right, terrific. Um, hey, good afternoon, and good to see everybody rolling in. Excited to continue with our series of webinar topics, especially as we get closer to the senior year college admissions, college application timeline. I feel like there's lots to talk about. So, and I do want to highlight again that or highlight for you that we do have our annual trends webinar that's coming end of next week, next Thursday, I believe. So please keep an eye out on the emails and would love to have you join in with us. I'll kind of do a deeper dive with more data to really parse what's been happening this past year in the college application season and college admissions ecosystem. And open to dialoguing with everybody. But today we're going to talk about the timeline for senior year college admissions. And I think if most of you, maybe some of you, maybe saw the emails, or maybe some of you who caught us posting it on LinkedIn. But our goal today is really for rising senior students and rising senior parents. But with that being said, I want you to go onto the chat and tell me, number one, where you're calling in from. But secondly, what grade are you representing? So if you're a student, what grade you're currently in? If you're a parent, what grade your student is in. So if you can go on to the chat and let us know, because I'm sure we have some younger families, and but this really is geared for rising senior, current junior students and their families to give them a maybe a heads up, maybe a glimpse of what's to come. And so, but good to hear that we have some juniors, rising seniors, and absolutely happy to have the ninth grade family is also coming in as well. No worries. Everybody is welcome without question. So, but definitely the 11th grade parents are here, and without question, excited to have you. Go ahead and keep posting if you don't mind, and would love to see where you're calling in from and also what grade your student is in. Um, we're gonna have, as always, if you've been as in our webinars, Anthony, my trusted partner of many years, will come back and will do questions. So go ahead in the Q&A box, post questions at any time. And so I feel like whenever a question is post it, and then we'll get to it, and we'll try to carve out as much time at the end to discuss as many of those questions as we can and to get some specifics because I think that for the topic today, it's we're not doing any hard deep dive into any topic because I feel like those some of those webinars are coming, but what it is again, it's for our rising seniors and their parents to get a glimpse of what's coming. And really, it is a slide deck of best practices for rising seniors and rising senior parents. And so, what it is that like as we I'll intro myself in a second, but as we kind of get into it, it's really to kind of get you oriented. It's not meant to cover every single thing in ultra depth, but it's really to open up the storehouse of topics and wisdom and to begin the process of applying to college. If you don't mind, maybe if any of you are new, let me do a quick intro myself. My name is Elton Lin. I'm CEO and founder of Illumina Education. I've been doing college advising for almost 16 years. Our team at Illumina Education works with around 50 students a year. We submit over 2,000 apps a year, read almost 4,000 essays a year. So we have quite a bit of just a matter of volume within our own student population. Our consulting director is a former University of California admissions counselor. We've had students admitted to every top 50 university, including every Ivy League, multiple times over. Our internal admin rate, the top 15 schools, is up to 7x national average. And I've been very fortunate to have been profiled by a few media outlets over the course of my almost 16 years of doing this work. So I'm always excited to just share whatever we have and whatever wisdom that we can share over for you to navigate this season more fluidly. That's really our goal. So let me begin by saying this is that I feel like this college application season is always, in many respects, fraught with a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of worry. And for a lot of students, it's just a kind of a fearful season of time. And I just want to kind of go back and say that when I applied to college, I'll tell you myself, nobody helped me. My parents, Chinese immigrant parents, they didn't know anything about the college admissions process. I never spoke to my college counselor, and I did not have the internet. I graduated in 1991. You can certainly do the math on my age, and I worked on my college essays on an Apple IIc. So it was like it was just yeah, I just didn't have had that much time, and I did eventually go to college. I went to UC Davis, and I did graduate and I would maybe argue that I had a productive life. So, but all that to be said, like it's gonna be okay, right? And as stressful as it seems, um, it's a very and I've seen a lot of student cases. Students do get to college, they do make it, and they do get things done, and things do get submitted, and students make their way towards this next season of life. And so I want to maybe orient our conversation towards this opportunity, this season as an opportunity of takeoff, of going onto a trip. And if you can imagine going on this trip and then maybe thinking of me as someone who's been through this process thousands of times and just giving you a few tips to think about. Because I always feel like oftentimes students and parents come, they feel like I need to absorb all this content, I need to master it, and I need to become an expert in the course of the next 6 months. And it's absolutely impossible. Um, so like you can watch this video over again. And I'll tell you right now, we have a free senior timeline calendar that you can download, and feel free to download that now if you want to. And it gives everybody some markers for what they should pay attention to and to track with you through the 2027, college application season, right? So we have this, right? So like I don't, I don't feel the pressure to like have to absorb every micro detail because there are quite a few things in this presentation. But don't feel like you have to like absorb everything. You can watch this video over again and it's fine. But like if I could maybe I would say establish some goals for ourselves today is just listen for three takeaways just for you. Like some of the things I mentioned may not apply to you, and that's okay, right? So you're not here to absorb everything. You're here just to grab some things that might really fit exactly your situation or your particular student profile or where you want to apply to college or how you're approaching your college list, whatever it might be. Like listen for three takeaways for yourself. Mark down two topics you need to dig into more. So maybe after this whole thing, oh, I really need to look more into financial aid. And I'm not going to do a deep dive into financial aid. It's going to be almost like a barely a touch on financial aid, but maybe you might need to dig in more to it. And then think of one person who might find this helpful. Now, I mean, you might think it's a marketing ploy. Certainly, we would love for you to share the presentation with friends who might be interested in this information. But I always find that it's helpful to think of one person to process some of this information with. So if you have a friend who you think, wow, it would be really helpful for me to talk about um, my activity lists, or talk about rec letters with, or whatever it might be. Think about that one person who might find this topic helpful, or it may be helpful for you to dialogue with that person. So listen for three different takeaways, mark down two topics, and think of one person who might find this helpful. And let's enjoy this journey of flight together. All right. So, all right. Senior year timeline. This is what we're going to discuss today. We're going to talk about rec letters. Again, it's going to be like a series of best practices, right? So, and then again, some things helpful, some things not. But rec letters, building activities list that strengthens your profile, starting your college essays, building a college list based on fit and goals, what to be mindful of the summer before 12th grade. So you're approaching this 12th grade time, summer before 12th grade season, what you need to be mindful of during that summer, and then stay current. And then how do you stay current on the latest shift in college admissions? So, rec letters, number one. Rec letters from teachers, request letters from teachers before the end of 11th grade. So now schools are changing some of the rules. Let me kind of just throw all this up first. Uh, Schools are changing some of their expectations. Some for a few schools, especially in the Bay Area here, they're asking students to ask their teachers earlier. But there's still a host of schools that haven't specifically set deadlines or dates. So for especially for those schools who haven't set those deadlines and dates, request a letter from teachers before the end of 11th grade. You do want to get in early, especially for teachers who are popular teachers to have rec letters requested from. And I have a couple of teachers, and I don't know, maybe there's some teachers here. Please comment as well. But teachers who said that like oftentimes they organize which ones they write first on who asks first. And so you want to ask early, and you don't want to be the last letter that the teacher writes, right? But I would say at the very least, ask before the end of 11th grade. The ideal scenario is you're asking 11th grade teachers. You're asking, and you need two. I didn't kind of specify this here as well, but you need ideally two to cover almost all your bases. Some schools require one, some schools don't require any, but asking for two teachers is the best bet to cover your basis. You want 11th grade teachers. You ideally want one STEM, one humanities. And I can certainly tell you why. You ideally want core subject teachers and not teachers from electives. And you want one letter that should align with your intended major. So that's the ideal scenario. So now, like whatever you kind of get, and I'm gonna have another slide of like caveats to that, but whatever you get, whatever you kind of, see about rec letters, default to this ideal scenario. If you can match this ideal scenario, that's really your best bet. And you certainly ideally would like to ask teachers who can tell stories about the students. So if you have a teacher, you don't want the teacher to just write that the student, did well in the class, um, got good scores. That doesn't tell the admission reader anything new about the student, right? Because they can see that the student got a good grade in class from their transcript. They can, they can see academic scores, but what they don't get from the transcript that they do get from the rec letter are examples of character, of a more human depiction of the student, of stories that cannot be quantified anywhere else. So ask teachers who can tell stories about the student. And then secondly, oftentimes schools will have this form, but if they don't, you can create one of your own. But you can create a brag sheet of yourself to give to your teachers and your school counselor with a clear list of accomplishments and specific stories. And if it's for a teacher, why you specifically like their class, to give teachers concrete examples and content to make it easy for them to write the rec letter. So creating a brag sheet for them is certainly to your advantage. Um, and so again, if you don't kind of forget about everything, snap back to this ideal scenario. There are all sorts of caveats, right? So what about electives that match within a major? What about ninth or 10th grade teachers? What about teachers who are club sponsors? What about outside mentors? I mean, I've heard them all, right? What about my pastors, spiritual mentors? What about supervisors of my part-time job? What about my parents? Like they're all there are sort of niche scenarios that would justify these particular situations to work as rec letters. But I would still encourage everyone to default back to the ideal scenario that I specified because colleges are trying to do their best to really understand a student's like work ethic. The most recent year teachers are really the best, like most recent measure or assessment of that student's work ethic. They want to see students' ability in core subjects because I mean they're maybe less concerned about like say a teacher in a business class and how that student will do in business. But they know that every student will need to take a core English class, core math class, core science class, and your ability to do well in those core classes is really important. So again, kind of coming back to this, whatever the caveat is, if you can default back to the original ideal scenario, that's really the best thing, best situation. And recommendations are becoming more important in an era of AI modified essays, bloated resumes, great inflation on transcripts. And this is all, I'll kind of get into great inflation on transcripts and maybe some of the other stuff in the trends webinar and give you a little bit of data behind it. But what it is that like a lot of students have super high grades. A lot of resumes are very rich in a lot of activity. And the teacher recs are really oftentimes one of the most human things, aspects of your college app. So recommendations are becoming more important in that context. All right. Activity lists. So suggestion here, make a list of everything you've done in high school. Everything. I mean, absolutely everything. So not just, I mean, school clubs, summer programs, summer jobs, those kind of things, but hobbies, family responsibilities, self-directed projects, research internships, obviously. If you've been crocheting for 8 years, that's fantastic. I have a student who was admitted to Harvard and MIT who was his 3 days a week. He had to pick up his little brother from music theater practice to help him practice and do you kind of like help him practice his musical theater. And it became a core story of his college essay, but it was an important part of his outside of class activities, right? So whatever it is, make a monster list of everything. Don't exclude anything. Err on including everything. And then after you've made that list, prioritize that list for commitment length. So length of commitment, obviously major related, leadership experience, and then depth of achievement. And then what it is that this list becomes a building block for your college app resume. So the activities that you put on your common application, your UC application, your UT application. And then it also becomes a sort of breeding ground or brainstorming tool for your college essays. And so kind of make that list and just take stock. And I would say even when you're done with making that list, be proud of all the things that you did in school. Like just and celebrate that. If your parents like just enjoy that list and be proud of what your students have been doing over the course of the last 4+ years. And then also as a note, some colleges will also accept a formal resume upload in addition to the activities that you put on the Common App. So, there's including Columbia and a few other Ivies, they will accept a formal resume. So you may take this activities list and then craft it as a more lengthy description to help readers understand in greater depth all the activities that you did. So, um, what are colleges trying to learn about you through your activities list? Obviously, what's important to you. Have you demonstrated your curiosity in your intended major? Do you have the grit to stay committed? I mean, if you can imagine, I mean, just if, I mean, I just, I would be very honest with you. I look at a lot of resumes. People apply for jobs within Illumin. I do feel like if the last like five like 5 jobs you've only had like 1 year at. I mean, that tells me something. So that kind of tells the reader something about a student who maybe their resume list or their activities list is a lot of activities that have a very short time period, right? So that's an issue. Do you have a grit to stay committed? How do you manage your time? What are you intellectually curious about? And are you someone who takes the initiative, which some might automatically think of like leadership expression in your school and your activities and your clubs, whatever it might be. So, what are colleges trying to learn from you? So, if you here's an example list of a student who's just writing down some things that they've done for a long time. You can, if you kind of, have your eyes kind of skim this a little bit. There's some music, youth group leadership, science Olympiad. But if you were to then reorganize this for a student who's majoring in biology, you might put at the top Science Olympiad captain, which I think makes a difference. Maybe you might put at the top independent science research project that you worked on for a summer plus, and then you wrote a paper. Maybe you submitted that paper for publication at some journal. Maybe you did some hospital volunteering that gives you some exposure to what healthcare is. Maybe you're a church youth group leader, which demonstrates some leadership, and maybe there's a long history of your commitment to church youth group, perhaps. Um, Maybe you took care of your little sister 3 afternoons for over the course of 3 years. That's great. Maybe you're part of speech and debate. Maybe you were a part-time job at the tea shop, varsity volleyball, National Spanish Honor Society, Community Service Club. So here's sort of just an array of things, and we can debate maybe National Spanish Honor Society should be higher, maybe tea shop should be lower. I mean, we can kind of debate a little bit here. Um, and maybe guitar playing should be higher. That's totally fine. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to help the reader, the admissions reader, understand your your readiness for the college major and your sort of leadership grit commitment component as it relates to like whether you would be successful on campus in the forthcoming 4 years, right? So, oops, let me go back here. So maybe um, the first three were highlighting maybe science related, perhaps leadership oriented activities. Maybe this next grouping is highlighting maybe commitment, leadership, a little bit more, like a little bit more about your character. And you're just trying to create a hierarchy that will help the reader understand your story best. So again, what are colleges trying to learn about you? What is important? Again, have you demonstrated your curiosity in your intended major? Again, grit, managing your time, intellectually curious, and are you someone who takes the initiative? Again, think about it from their perspective. They don't want students who are hiding in their dorm rooms. They want students who are actively engaging their community. They don't want students to drop out once they get into upper division biology. They want students to thrive once they arrive on campus. So the bigger thing here is like are you telling them that, what exactly are you trying to communicate to the reader to really help them understand that you're ready? Okay, college essays. Start early. So especially if you're a rising senior, it's April. You don't need to start right now. I would suggest focusing on your APs, doing well on your AP tests, get through your APs, get through your finals for the end of the year, and then once that's done, get started on your college essays. Normally, for our students who are working with us formally, we do a college essay boot camp literally the week after 11th grade is done. It's a 4-day college um, excuse me, there's a 4-day essay boot camp. We teach students what college admissions officers are looking for in college essays, coach them on writing early drafts of the main Common App personal statement, the 4 UC essays, and we try to get students ahead of schedule to reduce the stress, have them write better work. And so, but even if you're not working with us in that capacity, start early and focus on. Let me reveal all these together. Focus on telling stories. Show, don't tell, which is I think is the operative phrase. But focus on telling stories. Again, the rest of your application is data. Your activity list, in many respects, is data. They see objective things about you, but your personal statement should be personal and focusing on telling stories also helps you as the student connect with the reader who is also trying to connect with you as an applicant, right? So focusing on telling stories. Suggestion, I always feel like if I were to just kind of of course I've read a lot of essays over my time, have read a lot of triumphal scenarios, a lot of topics, right? But I'd suggest focusing on small moments because when you focus on small moments, it forces you as a student to really mind the depths of that small moment and mind the meaning of that small moment. And for you to kind of generate up to 650 words, which is the word limit on a common application personal statement, you really need to get into the details. And when you get into the details, it becomes more engaging. So I would suggest don't try to do a 4 year timeline of everything that you've accomplished. I would say don't try not to do, the 3 pointer at the buzzer kind of story, the big trophy moment. Focus on small moments that reveal your humanity, your character, and what you find important. So focus on small moments. Write down 5 defining moments from the last 4 years. No editing. Just kind of write down those 5 defining moments. Maybe skipping to the next one is that write a very long and ugly draft. Don't worry about structure. Just write down more. Take those 5 defining moments and just write them all out and see which story seems like it has the most legs, seems like it has the most merit, seems like it has the most energy from you as you write it. The last third of the essay should answer the so what. I did read it. I did. Sometimes we have families who just sign up for 1 hour consultations with me. We don't, they're not working with us over the course of the college application cycle. And I was reading a student's essay and I realized they told a story, but as a reader, as an admissions officer, I'm thinking like why does this matter for you? Like why does this matter as you think about coming to my college for the next 4 years? And so this aspect of so what, why does it matter? Why is it an important detail for me to share with you as I relocate to Ann Arbor, Michigan, or as I relocate to Baltimore, Maryland to go to Johns Hopkins? Like, why does it matter? So focus on why does it matter? When you get near the final draft, read the essay out loud. That's kind of like my little tip to help students catch like the last 10% of things that are awkward, things that don't make sense. And I would argue it's super effective. And then let me encourage you, if there's a little bit of a temptation, parents don't write your students' essay. So it's super obvious when I get it. It's super obvious, and it's a turn off. And if you can imagine, and I apologize for anybody who might be thinking about it, but just let me encourage you, don't write your students' essays. Like admissions readers are expecting perspectives from teenagers, right? So I think so. Don't over edit it from a parent's perspective. But I'll go back to read good sample essays. Um, I'd encourage you maybe not to read friends essays or friends kids essays. I think Johns Hopkins, if you just search John Hopkins essays that worked, it has what I would consider the most complete depository of just excellent essays, variable formats, different types of stories, some very basic storytelling, some very artful, poetic storytelling. And I would just begin there. This is good for the main Common App personal statement, not good for the UCs. Don't use those samples for the UCs, but it is good for the main personal statement. All right. The essay has one purpose, and it's to show that the student is ready for college. And so again, I kind of come back to this whole aspect of readiness from the activities list. But when the reader is done reading the story, do they feel excited for you to be on their campus? And exactly like what exactly are you ready for? And so once the student is ready, if they're saying, I'm ready to do what? I'm ready to passionately explore my major. Or maybe after they're done with your essay, you're saying, I'm ready to make friends with people who are different. So imagine this past year, especially at some of the flagship universities across the United States, massive protests, a lot of just students from various different um, political groups, ethnic groups, different groups clashing on campus, a ton of just difficult situations on these university campus. So if you can imagine an admissions reader who's reading about someone who's excited and ready to make friends with people who are different, that's someone they would want on their campus. If you don't mind, let me grab a drink of water. If once they're reading your essay, are you ready to explore your major? Are you ready to make friends with people who are different? Are you ready to actively contribute to your school community? Are you ready to grow and be challenged? Are you ready to be the solution and not the problem? And so when you again think about it from their perspective, they want to get to know you, but they want to add a student who is going to be a thriving, contributing, positive influence on their school campus, right? So are you ready, right? So I think this is where the essays achieve a particular purpose, and it's really to signal whether you're ready for college. All right, building a college list. This is the one that's going to be a little bit more mechanical, and I will try to kind of get through this because I just want to give, again, everybody an initial primer on how to tackle these topics. And then I'll very like this building a college list. We're going to do also early decision webinar. We'll kind of do a deeper dive in that webinar. But just to give you an initial beginning point on building a college list, let me just kind of throw this out first. Let me encourage you that balance is beautiful. Having a balanced college list where you're not applying to only Ivy Leagues, you're also not applying to only safety schools. Let me say balance is beautiful and safer is better. Find a right fit for you and try not to compare. I feel like as cliched as it is, comparison just robs us of our joy, you know? And so there's gonna be a right fit for you. There's gonna be a school that's a better fit for you, that's not as good of a fit for somebody else. And so you need to think about what is right for you. I'll do a very super quick anecdote. There's a student of ours a couple years ago, really had their mindset on Cornell. Unfortunately, was waitlisted to Cornell, was admitted to a number of UCs, was also admitted to UC Santa Cruz, realized that Santa Cruz had a specific constitutional history professor that fit exactly what he was looking to explore and had their own research institute particular in this very specific niche subject that he was fascinated with. And he realized that UC Santa, among all the schools, he was admitted to Irvine, was admitted to Santa Barbara, was admitted to Davis, but he ended up going to Santa Cruz because it exactly fit what he was looking for. And he ended up realizing that UC Santa Cruz was very likely a better fit for him than Cornell, even if he were to get in. And so find a right fit for you, try not to compare, prioritize which of the below is more important. So academic fit, like whether this school, like I just had a parent literally just a couple days ago who said, I don't care about the major. I just want them to get into a particular type of school. I'm not saying I agree. I'm just saying at least get it out all on the table and at least be forthright about it. So, and for other families, they don't care about the school, but it's more important that they get the major, whether it's perhaps it's computer engineering, maybe it's chemical engineering, maybe it's psychology, whatever it might be. The major is more important. So, is academic fit the more important? Is social fit the most important? Is financial fit the most important? Is career fit, like where students go after they graduate? Maybe that's more important. So prioritize which the below is more important, and then discuss the importance of prestige. Just get it out on the table. I feel like I could do another hour webinar on like how important is it to get into a top ranked school. I think for us, we are far more engaged, and we believe that finding the right fit school is far more important than climbing a particular ranking. But I want to say that ranking in all the data, ranking is not as important as it seems. I also want to say that ranking is also has value, right? So like It's neither both extremes, but it's important for students and families to at least get it out on the table, discuss it ahead of time so that there's no surprise when you start discussing which colleges to choose. Okay. Um, Create a balanced list with more safety schools. And if you're thinking about a place to begin, two dream schools, three reach, four target, five safety. Then I'll give you the category for like what defines dream, reach, target, safety. But you're erring on more target and safety schools. I also want to make a note, especially for those families where it's important, safety range schools are more likely to provide merit aid. And there's a whole system, which is another conversation for another time, to where often schools are using scholarship money to try to attract students to come. And so I often tell families you have a range of schools, but if a school were to offer you like 15, 20, or even $25,000 a year to go, it could be, I mean, that's could be up to $100,000 a year, $100,000 over the course of 4 years. Would you think about going? You may not end up going, but you at least want to have the offer on the table, right? So I would suggest if it's helpful to you to apply to more safety schools, get more merited offers, and then have more options on the table. Secondly, tour a variety of campus types. So if you cannot possibly visit every school. I mean, it doesn't work that way. So visit different types of schools: large public school, medium private school, small liberal arts college, and try to get a sense of the type of environment that really fits you. Maybe a little bit, maybe some of you know, but use your email, the email you're going to use for your college app platform signups. Use that email to register for the tour because that's the only way for schools to really track and be sure that you've come and kind of line up the applicant to the student who showed up on campus. This if you've heard the word demonstrated interest, it does matter for a lot of schools, not for every school. But if you're taking tours already, use your student email to make sure they track. Academic fit, you have the major, student faculty ratio, research heavy or discussion based, financial fit. Every school has a net price calculator on their website. I find that the net price calculator in actuality is maybe like 75 to 80% accurate. So it's not ultra accurate, but it's accurate enough for you to get an understanding of how much financial aid you might get. And so make use of that. And then lastly, career fit, strong pipelines to internships, hospitals for pre-med, or the specific companies that students end up working at once they graduate. So there is that. If you just search university graduation outcomes or undergraduate outcomes, you'll get a list of oftentimes companies that frequently hire from that university. So that information is out there and it's super helpful. So maybe just like real quick, just to make sure that we're all in the same kind of place. Dream School, less than 10% admit rate, which basically makes most of the Ivy Leagues. Reach schools anywhere between 10 and 40% admit likelihood. Target 40-60, safety greater than 60% likelihood. So that's kind of your basic. And then let me kind of get into um, um, like how do you create that list? You have to compare your students' average GPA, test scores, and resume to determine an appropriate range of colleges. So these are a couple of ways. I'd like you to focus on just the first two. So there's national averages for GPA, SAT, and ACT scores, and then there's high school specific data for GPA and SAT, and ACT scores. So most universities publish a national average. I find a national average to be very, generally speaking, not very helpful because there's so many nuances, location, type of high school, geographic background, like all those kind of things. But the better data set is your high school specific data set. So if you have national data, I would suggest that like you have to be if you want to consider it a safety school, you have to be in the above the 75th percentile, top 25% of the average admitted GPA and test score. So like find that if it's whatever it might be, if it's a 1300 average SAT and you're probably at around a 1550, then that's great. You're probably in that top 25th percent, 25%, 25%. For target, if you're within the 50 to 70th percentile, and then if you're anywhere below the average entry GPA and test score, then you should really consider it a reach school. So if you consider for this student, he wants to apply to Cornell. He has a GPA of 3.75. The average entry GPA for Cornell is nationally is 3.88. The average SAT for Cornell is 1470. This is like a maybe 4 or 5 year data point, so it might have gone up a little bit. SAT 1470, ACT 33. So if you just look at the student, his GPA is lower than the average entry GPA. Test score a little bit higher. But if your GPA is lower, then automatically you should consider it a reach school. Okay, so now if you have high school specific data, then you have access. Now your high school may use Naviance, it may use Score, it may use My Learning. There's a whole host of different platforms that maintain all the high school specific data. You have access to all this information that'll help you determine like how many students from Palo Alto High School, how many students from Leland High School are getting into particular colleges, what percentage of them are getting into those colleges on early, what percentage of those students are getting in on the regular round. You can get all that information via these platforms. And so maybe as a quick thing, you feel free to maybe screenshot this one if you'd like, but how do you determine reach target and safety if you do have some high school specific data? If you're below the average GPA, you should always consider it as reach. If you're below the average SAT and SET score, then you should always consider it as reach. And there's only really kind of a small kind of scenario where you really should consider the school a genuine safety, right? So I think you need to be well above the average entry test score, well above the GPA range, for you to really consider it as a safety school. Now, this is a screenshot from Naviance, which is used by a particular school here in the Bay Area. Hopefully, you don't know who Theo is, but Theo's applying to Cornell, and you can literally match up on Naviance like a school specific average GPA. So from Theo's high school, the average entry GPA from students from his high school is 4.33. Theo's GPA is 4.21. You look at his ACT 34, average ACT entry from his high school is 33. But again, his GPA is lower than the average entry GPA from students from his high school. So you still have to consider it a reach in his case. Okay. All right. So let me I think I will do the early application thing in another webinar, but go ahead and feel free to do a quick scan. I think the bigger thing to know here is that early decision, like the main thing right now is that applying early, especially early decision, is carrying more weight. And I will go into some data on the trends webinar, but that really is a leverage point or sort of an important sort of consideration, I think, for students if they really want to think about which particular schools they really have high priority that they really want to get into. So I'll get into the early decision stuff on another webinar, but the truth is that it is becoming more and more important and more of a determining factor as it relates to students getting into the students of their choice. All right, college of their choice. Summer before senior year. Maybe the thing I want to highlight here is that if you have any D's in your transcript, um, this is the last summer before college apps come that you have an opportunity to replace it. So if you have any D's, if you got a D in like say second semester chemistry, you haven't replaced it yet. If you retake second semester chemistry and even get a B, you'll see your GPA calculation just rocket up, like. And so if you have any D's, focus on replacing those D's the summer. If you haven't done it already, replace it the summer after 11th grade, get it replaced, and you'll see your GPA go up. Um, Also, maybe a couple other things here. Start attending online info sessions of the colleges that are on your list. Again, going back to this aspect of demonstrated interest, as you refine your list, you can't go to every online info session of every university. But for the maybe 10 or 12 high priority schools, go to the online info session. Now, going to an online info session for Stanford isn't going to move the needle. But for a lot of the safety schools that are trying to ascertain how likely you are to actually come, if there's a safety school that has a student, two students are exactly the same, and one student came to an info session, just by logic, you'll assume that the student who came to the info session is more likely to come. So start attending online info sessions with colleges on your list. Register for a final SAT, ACT in the fall. October, if you want to get it in before early, or get the score in before you submit your early applications. So some things to consider. Staying up to date. Lastly, again, use a dedicated email to sign up for official email lists. Three good sources if you want to be on another email list. The Common Application has good information. National Association for College Admissions Counseling, fairtest.org will often update which schools are now requiring tests, which schools are going test optional. And then you can also follow on social media, especially for students, including Instagram and TikTok. Almost every school has their own specific admissions office account. So don't just follow the Stanford University um, account. You need to follow specifically the admissions office account. So, and oftentimes they will, if there's any changes, updates, you can get that on social media. We didn't even cover athletic recruitment, but this is in particular very important for recruitable athletes because oftentimes, including with the sport, it's oftentimes a primary way to communicate with the recruiter. I'll throw this up again because my goal for us together was to just isolate some takeaways. You can always download this free timeline calendar to help you keep track. But coming back to our goals today, listen for three takeaways just for you. Mark down two topics you need to dig into more. Think about one person who might find this helpful. If you don't mind going on to the chat and just maybe marking down what was one takeaway for you, or what was one helpful aspect of this presentation for you. So that would be super helpful for me, be super helpful for Anthony as well. And then this way we can refine this presentation and make it as helpful as possible. So what's one takeaway that you got from this presentation? And if nobody comments, then we know how helpful this presentation was, right, Anthony? So last thing before Anthony kind of tackles some questions is, man, students are stressed, and this process is very anxiety ridden. Students know what's at stake. So let me encourage you, if you're a parent on this call, let me encourage you to remind your kids often, especially early in the timeline. Remind them often that you love them, regardless of how this process turns out, regardless of what schools are admitted into. Remind them that you love them no matter what, and it does matter. Okay, so questions? Go ahead and post on the Q&A. I think there were maybe maybe there was a question on the chat as well. And thank you, everybody who posted what's been helpful for you on the webinar chat. Building a college list, starting activities list. Yeah, write down 5 defining moments. Absolutely. So, Anthony, what are what questions we got?
Yeah, this webinar feels like you took two webinars and jammed them together in terms of just how much stuff we were going through. But
I
one
know. I'm
parent had the
sorry.
question about had the question about how a gap year would be viewed if a student is considering that going into the admission cycle. How would that kind of play into yeah, a strategy for a student.
Yeah, I mean, I generally, most schools are generally very, very open with gap years. I generally wouldn't make it a like I wouldn't put that like, oh, I just want to let you know I really want to do a gap year. I wouldn't, I wouldn't like high profile that in your essay. I would just apply in, and then when it's time for you to like, if you're making a final decision on wanting to do a gap year then you can make a request. Schools don't have to honor it, but I would say the overwhelming majority of schools do. And so if you're a viable applicant that they want to keep, oftentimes requesting a gap year is like has almost no problem. So if you want to kind of get some clarity, you can always ask about it prior to submitting your application. But yeah, the overwhelming majority of schools welcome the gap year. I wouldn't make it prominent in your essay. So, and just applying as a student. I'll leave it as that. So,
And then, yeah, the other question you saw in the chat was related to the Johns Hopkins essays that worked. They were asking
mhm.
for clarification about why that doesn't work for UCs.
Yeah, the UCSAs are its own essay um, organism. That's probably maybe a better word, but um, the UCSAs, to be frank with you, need to be written a certain way because the review process is very, very quick, and many of the UC campuses have over 100,000 applications, including like a UC Davis, which I think 2 years ago eclipsed 100K in their applicant pool. So you can imagine if you're yeah, if you're reading like a lot of applications, you really only have a certain amount of time. So we have our own sort of internal format for how to coach students on writing a UCSA that helps the reader understand their story quickly, gain the important aspects for what they need on the UCSA, and but you can also search online. That content's online, so and you'll see that the UCSA is to be written in a certain way. So yeah.
A question. There's a question about honors colleges. I guess I think related to when you're thinking about building a college list, how would you think about honors colleges? And this person was specifically asking about CSU honors schools or honor colleges. But I guess Elton, any thoughts about how you would factor that into a school list strategy?
Yeah, yeah. From a practical standpoint, like for a lot of schools that have an honors college, like probably the most um I just thinking about this only because I had a student work on this past year. Like Penn State has an extra essay, Boston University. If you're applying into the honors college, there's like there's like one or two extra essays that you need to do, but it does provide, in most cases, preferential enrollment of classes. It provides mentorship from professors. It makes maybe a big school experience into a small school experience, and also preferential assignment for research opportunities. So I think if you're like say the option of like say going to also for in the UC system, Regents is also considered in some respects like an honors college. So you get some honors college type benefits by being a Regent scholar. And so if you're going to like say a super large public school like University of Michigan or University of Washington, UT Austin, but you're able to get an honors college uh, opportunity at some of these large schools, you get some of the small school benefit, and I would consider it. There's no question that it's a benefit. So um, CSUs are different. There are some CSUs that do have some honors college or honors program type, and oftentimes it's based on major, but uh, but it's very campus specific. So, but all that to be said, figure out which schools are interesting to you first, and then subcategorize for honors college.
And then a question about what primary data sources should students and parents be using to build that reach target safety list.
Yeah, so I think
Because
the
yeah, because
oh,
there's the score and or score and Naviance and just the general population.
Yeah, so I always, if you can get high school specific data, that's always best. I would say these days, I think it's reliably two-thirds of the schools can get your high school specific data. If not, then the College Board publishes the common data set for the overwhelming majority of universities that participate. So you can actually go on to, if you just search Boston University common data set, you'll get the a common set of data that every school shares publicly, and that includes average GPA, oftentimes a range of test scores of students who've been admitted. But again, it's a national average, and truth be told, it's a big difference between a student from South Dakota and a student from Northern California. So, but with that being said, that's if you don't have any data, that's where you can get some data. So,
I'll put out a last call
all
for
right.
questions. We got a couple more minutes and we'll see if anyone else has some other thoughts.
Anthony, I did jam like three presentations into one. So thank all of you for hanging on with me. And again, I will do the trends webinar next week. And invariably, we will do a deep dive, especially on early decision. So we're coming out with more content and things that are helpful. So please keep a lookout in your emails. And download the calendar and give us some feedback. It's always, it's always helpful for us to make improvements, see if there's data missing that you think will be helpful to you. Our team can put out a revision, but would love to hear from you. All right, are we? If no other questions, I would love to release everyone to go have a good dinner, including Anthony and myself. And so again, happy to have all of you on. Thank you so much. Anthony, any last words?
No, that was it. I definitely again the timeline, the calendar, definitely would love some thoughts, some feedback. I guess this is sort of our V0. Well, maybe V0 is a little bit too much,
Point
but
one.
definitely, yeah, definitely would want to see how people kind of use it and engage with it. So absolutely would love feedback.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next one. It's coming next week. And have a good evening. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
See you.